might be my last question about the actual production of the album. It shows that Dan Wexler is the producer, but Eddie Trunk was the executive producer. What does that mean? Did Eddie Trunk do anything besides? I mean, what was his role? I know he's really a big spokesperson now for heavy metal, and I know some people really like him, some people don't care for him so much. But
right,
he's kind of a mixed bag with the heavy metal fans, I think. But what did Eddie Trunk do for the band, and did he actually have much to do with the production of the album, or do you know?
that's a great question. From what I don't know the full answer, but from what I know and what I remember, and first of all, to take a step back for Eddie Trunk, yeah, people are polarized about his, people are polarized in their view about him. They, love him or hate him, wherever you are on the spectrum. He single-handedly has carried the heavy metal flag for the last, umpteen years, or 20, 25 years, whatever it's been. I guess even, I guess it's been since I was 19. So yeah, it's been over 30 years. So he just has done so much for heavy metal. So love him or hate him, he's a super fan. He's like me with Icon. He loved Icon. He loves all these bands. He's to every band like I am to Icon. He loved all of them before he even knew them. And just to shake their hands, he was a super fan. He's very much like that Almost Famous movie, Cameron Crowe. He's kind of like that. He's a fan's fan. And so he had, I'm sure, an ear for what the label wanted to hear, with Megaforce. So Megaforce at that time, I think, didn't they have like Dave from Megadeth's solo projects or something? They had a lot of, I think, Megadeth and some other, and there, I don't know if Anthrax, Pantera, I don't know if those bands were involved or not, but it was very much in that style of like thrash, heavy metal, really leaning a little bit more towards thrash, and at that time. So I think that Eddie's influence on the album was to really listen to what Dan is pumping out, because Dan's writing, recording, producing, and mixing, and even final edits and making decisions on the music, because Dan knows the Icon sound, and he really sat with, the producers for Icon and Night of the Crime, who were incredible producers, obviously writing songs for Kiss and really, large bands. And, with Eddie Kramer and people like that helped those albums. And so Dan Wexler knew that sound, and he knew what they were going for, but he would probably show the song. I'm guessing he would show the songs to Ed, and Ed just kind of had final say, or was a sounding board for Dan. I think that was the nature of their relationship. And it makes sense, because an A&R person is putting their entire budget, or a very large portion of their budget, into promoting this band and putting the band on tour. We did not have, usually tours back then were funded by the label and or by selling merch from other tours. They didn't have any recent tours with a lot of merch. So I think they even fronted us the money. We made around $75,000 in merch. And I think that was what was paid back to the label for the tour. So, or to the management company for the tour and the label. So a combo of, Megaforce and the management put money together to put us on the road. And because Eddie Trunk was putting so much of his heart and soul and budget into that, he wanted some final say, from my understanding, in those songs. I could be completely wrong, and the band wound up convincing him, because Wexler's an amazing musician. He's an amazing producer. He's an amazing human being. All of them are. They're all very, very good at what they do. Incredible musicians and incredible songwriters. So I know they had a lot of pull and a lot of, say, even all the way back to Varney and the Icon album. Varney's recording with them on the Icon album. And then I guess, Night of the Crime and all of the songwriters that worked with them and everything on Night of the Crime. I think they had a lot of say, no matter who was working with them. But anyways, that's my overall understanding what a producer and executive producer should be. Executive producer having final say. Producers pitch to them their mixes and final mixes and stuff, and they say, okay, which, now what's the order of the album? What do you see? Which song do you want to cut? Whatever, and then they kind of spar back and forth for what should be on that album.
Okay.
And in what order. Yeah. I remember Eddie being right there during the recordings, my audition. I mean, he was in there helping mold the band into the twin axe attack again of Icon and of Night of the Crime, to go on the road.
He really invested both time and money, basically.
He really was. Yeah. And even just as a fan, I mean, he's lauded that album, the first two albums numerous times on that metal show, his show, and rightfully so. They're great albums that did nothing, sadly, and comparatively speaking to other albums of the time. So yeah, he's just been a proponent of the band. They're one of his pet projects, so he really had a vested interest in it. And I do think he has a good ear for music, and he's a great interviewer. He's a good guy. I think he's a good guy. I think anybody that kind of comes down on him, I mean, it's one of those sellout things, right? Like back in the day, you can only get so popular being underground. And then as soon as you achieve some notoriety and some publishing and distribution, you're going to have naysayers that say, oh, you're not doing the stuff that I want. Well, it's like being president of the United States. You can't do everything that everyone wants all the time. You have to do something that hopefully most of the people want. You have to really go with your gut. He has a really good gut. He tries to get really good bands in there. Certain bands like Kiss gave him the, cold shoulder for years and stuff. It's just really hard for him to get large bands in there. But when he does get one of our favorites in as fans, we love it. Like Mike Portnoy, like people like that. He gets fan favorites, and it's fun. And he'll get Jakey Lee in there, and he'll be on an amp playing to the credits and to the commercials and stuff, and just really fun things like that. I love the show.
You did one music video, Taking My Breath Away, sorry. What was that like, making the music video? And you were on a volcano, right? Is that how it went? I was looking at it. I think they're on a volcano.
Yeah. I mean, first and foremost, I met the model in the video, Carrie Henderson. Beautiful. She's 5'10". I'm not 5'10". I'm like 5'6". So she's just this beautiful model. I was talking to her while we were filming the video. I think she was 18, I was 19. So we kind of, commiserated over a video shoot, and just how hard it, she's got to be on all these rocks crawling around. It's freezing, it's hot, it's like, it's really cold in the morning, and it's really hot, when the sun comes up. And I just remember, meeting her there, and just, it's certainly life-changing to have met her, because we dated for 3.5 years. And after the band broke up, I wound up moving in her in Paris separately. We moved to both cities and lived together after the band broke up. So because we broke up when we were in Europe, and so she was over there at the time. She's like, come live with me. And I was like, that'd be great. So that was pretty amazing, meeting somebody pretty important in your life at that age, and certainly the longest relationship that I'd had at that age. So we show up for the video. And did you ever see Wayne's World 2 with Tia Carrere, or her name is? She's on this mountain, and they have, like the kind of like what you were talking about, the executive producer guy that just flies in with a cigar, and he's like, are we done yet? And it's just like more smoke, more everything, that kind of vibe that they parodied in Wayne's World 2. I felt like we lived it. Like we were on that mountain, and it's like, it's smoke, and everyone's like scouting and like, with their guitars, almost like we're Wasp or something. And Wasp, of course, also did, Wild Child, the video for Wild Child on the mountain. But that was, this was before I knew who Wasp was. This was before MTV. This was before internet, all of it. So I didn't know about any of that stuff, but all I knew is that this is really kind of goofy, that we're on this mountain. But it worked, it was fun to do. And we showed up. It's long hours. You're listening to the song hundreds of times. Well, probably, tens of times. But when you hear it for like 45, 55 times, you're done. You're over it. You're just like, can we wrap this up? So you just shoot again and again. They're trying to get all the shots. They want to piece it together. Danny's solo where he breaks his guitar and everything, that took a little while. That took a couple hours or something. And they're actually selling that guitar that he played in that video. They're selling it on the Icon page on Facebook. Yeah, there's like it's at one of the guitar shops I think in Mesa. It's for sale now. So anyway, they're selling that guitar. So it was, it was kind of a big deal to have really nice production behind us. It was a professionally shot video. There was, pretty good direction behind it. They had a good vision about what they wanted to execute on. And we just executed on the vision and just hung out in the mountain and shook our hair a lot and played a lot of solos. It was pretty fun. it was work, but it was a lot of fun.
Well, you answered my question because I was watching that video pretty closely, and I couldn't see a single shot where you had the model and anybody in the band in the same shot. And so I was wondering if she was even there at the same time. But maybe I missed something. I'm not sure, but
that's true. They mostly shot Carrie separately, but she was there with I think we were walking down the hill, and she was there with us or something like that. I don't know. She was near us as we were walking. It was yeah. We definitely we had to pay for her time, and so I think they were trying to optimize her time,
right,
and make sure that they captured the shots they needed quickly before the band shots, because the band shots just took so much longer. Right. And she was a professional model, so she knew what she was doing. So I think those shots went faster, and they were smart to do that. Otherwise, we would have run out of time.
So one of the questions I kind of had as I was listening to the album was, why was Taking My Breath Away the first single? What was it about it? Was it the band's favorite? Was it the label's favorite? Who made that decision and why? Or do you know?
I don't know that answer. And I'm really shocked at On Your Feet being the video for the first album. And or am I getting it wrong? It's the first album, right? Wait, On Your Feet. No, wait. Maybe it's neither. It's so funny. I should know this. I'm not a fan of that song, and obviously so. Like I know every other song with encyclopedic knowledge, but I don't know much about On Your Feet. I wasn't really into that song, and I don't know how they chose that song, and I don't really remember how they chose Taking My Breath Away either. It's very choppy for me. It's not very iconic in sound. When I think of icon sounds, I think of, Whites of Their Eyes, like da 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 da, like really cool, punchy, fun hits. And Under My Gun, stuff like that. All of the really fun taglines on guitar that are really fun to play. With Taking My Breath Away, it's very choppy. It's like da 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 da. I mean, you can't dance to it. It's just like you do the robot to it. Like I don't know why I chose that song. I really don't.
Dance and stop. Yeah,
I know it was kind of a wild choice, but I have to assume that On Your Feet and Taking My Breath Away were chosen because they were simpler songs. I guess there was a certain simplicity to it that maybe the label felt was more listenable and marketable. Total guess. But there's so many songs I would have chosen, on that album. I think Forever Young we played a lot on tour. That was one of the best songs live. That would go over really well. I liked Holy Man's War. I liked, I guess even Two for the Road might have even been a better video. I don't know, total guess, but anyway.
One of my favorite songs on here is A Far Cry. I thought that would have been a really good
Another great one. Yeah, A Far Cry and Holy Man's War were two of my favorites.
A hard-hitting song first, and then go with like a ballad.
Right.
And Forever Young might have been a good second song, or
absolutely agree.
One of those songs might have been a good second song, but so I kind of heard that. I didn't follow Taking My Breath Away. I like it; it's good, but I didn't think it was a single. Would have been. I didn't sound like a good single to me.
I probably think so either. Yeah, I think that's a very astute, observation. I loved Far Cry and Holy Man's War. Those were two of my favorites. I also want to say, you're coming from Steve Clifford. And by the way, let me know on time. I know we're a minute over, so I have time, but you let me know what.
I'm okay. I'm okay. I just didn't want to waste your time.
Cool. Not a way. This is exciting. I never talk to anybody about this stuff other than the guys in the band and some fans here. And this is really fun. Never been interviewed, so this is a blast. But Steve Clifford's voice. I want to say, Steve Clifford's voice was otherworldly. Like for me, it was a combination of almost like Blackie Lawless and like Rick Springfield or something. Like he had the ability to sound very accessible and radio friendly, like on Night of the Crime, but he also had a very intense growling kind of voice like Blackie Lawless, where it was like a contrived voice. And I even asked Steve about this recently. I was asking him, how did you make that voice? Do you contrive it to sound like that on the Icon album? The first album, it was so grovelly and and amazing. You know, how did you do that? And he doesn't really remember, but, you know, we kind of talked about it a little bit. But I think some of that was maybe at the urging of the producers, also giving him a certain sound, very, very much like Mutt Lange would give, you know, the sound to Brian Johnson of AC/DC, and you know, and of you know, Mutt Lange worked, of course, with Bryan Adams, you know, another incredible vocalist with a very inimitable voice. Also Def Leppard, you know, he worked with all these great, you know, Mutt Lange worked with all these great bands. I think that was something similar like that when they did the Icon album. So they've got Steve's voice. It's amazing. Got the Icon album in the bag. It's done. They do Night of the Crime, another amazing album. We think it's going to take him into the stratosphere again. It's going to be amazing. Steve leaves, you know, difficult run of things, you know, that it circus closes down, everybody goes home. Then they find Jerry, kind of an anomaly. They were lucky to find him. You know, it was very hard. They did tons of auditions, and I'd moved to LA during that time. So I just moved to LA and I was going to MIT while all this was happening, while they found Jerry. And so they actually, I'm sorry, they found him in '85. So I think it was just kind of like not as following the band as much when that happened, something like that. '85 or '86 when they found him. So he's in the band. And they do a More Perfect Union, which I want to mention. You know, the first album, amazing. Second album, amazing. More Perfect Union was a really solid effort from all of them, with locally produced, really solid effort. You know, locally distributed, locally produced. I don't know how many thousands of copies they even distributed, but those of us that have a copy, it's a really good album. But more importantly, it captures the epitome of Jerry Harrison's voice and his sweet spot, which was more pop and a little bit of Whitesnake. Like that's kind of his vibe. That's his sound. And I felt that, you know, they kind of shuffled all that aside for, you know, for the album with that Dan produced, you know, the fourth album. So for Right Between Your Eyes, they wanted Jerry to sing more like Steven. And that's why I think those songs that aren't really resonating with you and me, and we're like, I could take it, I could leave it. And it's another reason why when people talk about this band, they usually only mention the first two albums. The first two albums were incredible, you know, and they were done professionally with, you know, really solid production and a good team behind them. The third album was locally produced and locally, you know, homegrown and recorded and all that. So was the fourth album, you know, so was Right Between Your Eyes, Right Between the Eyes. So, I think that's what kind of happened with Right Between the Eyes, is they really pushed Jerry's voice to try to sing more like Clifford. Didn't quite work, kind of fell flat a little bit. And even vocally, when we were playing out live, I remember one of the things I think that there was the demise of the incarnation of Icon that I was in, was that Jerry's voice wasn't able to keep up live. You know, it was really, they were, you know, we were all really kind of pushing him to sing like Clifford and really scream those songs and play a lot of those older songs. And they're hard to sing. You know, there are very few vocalists who can sing like that. Anyway, you know, I just think it's worth saying Jerry's sweet spot was the third album, you know, was A More Perfect Union. And those songs are amazing. I love those songs. I like those songs probably a little bit more than I like Right Between the Eyes. I think it's for that reason.
I know it's a hard album to find.
It is, yeah. I should try to dig up my copy and maybe put it online or something. There's a song called Eyes of a Prisoner, which I just absolutely love. And I just can't find that anywhere online. And I'd love to hear that song again at some point. But yeah, it's a great album, and it's really in his sweet spot. It really, you know, was a good vehicle for his voice.
I think you addressed a few things that I was going to ask, because I know, just as I've probably told you already, I did not know Icon from anybody before I dug out Right Between the Eyes from a box that I had of CDs. Somebody had, I was on Metal Sludge. I don't know if you're familiar with Metal Sludge, but they, I was on their board, and someone was just giving away CDs, and I'm like, well, what the heck? I think I picked Icon and a couple of other CDs, and the dude just sent them to me. Didn't have to pay for them or anything. So I was like,
that's
sweet,
awesome.
3 CDs. And I remember I probably listened to it once and I said, oh, it's okay, and I put it away. I was ashamed to say. But then I decided, like, I want to try and do a show, and I got like these boxes of CDs, and you know, I'm getting to that age where I'll buy a CD, but I really don't have a chance to really listen to it like I did when I was a kid. When you just sit
Right.
there and listen to it, look at
In
the lyrics,
full.
and
Yeah.
ingest it, over and over and over and over. Here, I just listen to it, put it in the car, and put it away, and I'm done. But so I was like, you know what, I'm going to try it. And so I just went into my box, pulled out a CD, and it was the Icon CD, and I was like, oh, good, it's an album I don't even know. I could have pulled Def Leppard Hysteria, I don't know, and I would have known that album pretty well.
Oh,
And the goal was to listen to these
yeah.
CDs with new ears, I assume, or old ears, however you want to put it. And
Interesting.
so I kind of started my Icon journey with that album. And in that process, I joined the Facebook page and I told them, I'm trying to start this page. And I got Right Between the Eyes. And the first person, I think, said, you just try one of the other albums. You might get more people watching it. you know, like,
I know
this
everyone
album's not
always says that on the
that
Icon page. They always say the same thing. They're like, the first two albums were amazing. They never
good.
talk about Right Between the Eyes. And it's really funny when they do. There have been a lot of players that didn't play on an album and only joined the touring group. Even a lot of Whitesnake's guitar players were only in the touring group and weren't on the album, but maybe their picture was on the album or something, like that. And even I think Ozzy Osbourne's band, Blizzard of Oz, different things happen between studio and touring bands all the time. But it's funny because I don't know if I've heard of an album spoken about more in terms of, well, Drew Bollmann was on the album, but he didn't actually play on the album now. And I was like, why does anyone even care? Like, nobody knows about this album. I'm a nobody. Why is anyone even talking about it? Why are people so hell-bent on like stating, but he didn't actually play on the album? I mean, and I'm even slightly, proud of not having played on the album because I didn't have any influence in the album. So, I
Yeah.
would have rather have had a say if I played on the album, but I didn't. So it was
You're
fun.
connected whether
I
you
laughed.
like it or not.
Yeah, I love the band. I'm still a huge fan.
Yeah.
I'm a massive fan of the first two albums, of course. It's just really good music, and everyone who listened to it is surprised that it didn't go anywhere, and it just was not pushed by the label, by Capitol at the time.
Yeah.
So,
And so
anyways,
so in the process of listening to this album, I tried not to listen to the other two albums since they were so much better. I wanted to try to give it, its own merits, listen to it on its own merits.
wow.
And so I managed to listen to a couple of the songs on YouTube, watch the music video that they put out earlier. And I get a vibe, like I get a Quiet Riot vibe, I guess, from the couple songs I heard, mental health
That's
type
true.
music.
Yeah,
And then when
I
I
would say.
listen to Right Between the Eyes, like you were saying, it's more Whitesnake, more
Right.
like 87 Whitesnake. And when
Yep.
you talk about Jerry, his singing, I even had a note there saying that, I liked his singing, but I thought maybe he might have pushed it a little bit too much here and there. And I guess that makes
Yeah.
sense that they're trying to make him sing like the
Like
last
Steve
singer.
Clifford. Yeah, like Steve Clifford.
And they're kind of pushing him a little bit further than he's probably comfortable. So
Yeah,
I'm
I would say
I'm
so.
actually really curious to how that third album was, and to hear him sing the way he
Oh,
wants to sing.
yeah, great album. And I think his influence was pretty strong on that album. I think a lot of those songs were, penned by him in different forms when he was in his band. I think his band was called Harlequin in LA. And that's the band he was in, I think, when they found him or something, or maybe he had just left or something. But those songs are, in his DNA. I mean, and they're really well written, and they're also like a really good place. They're a really good springboard off of Night of the Crime, because Icon, the self-titled debut, was very metal, but it's also kind of pop metal. It was very catchy metal. We didn't have a lot of different types of metal at the time, I guess, but it was still pretty catchy metal, but it was still pretty solid metal. Night of the Crime was like what I'd like to call pop metal, like put the pop before the metal. And it was, I mean, there were just so many ballads. There's like 5 ballads or something out of a 12-song record. And I mean, they're each amazing ballads of themselves. And, just the musicianship was incredible. But I don't know that there was a market for it at that time. I think they were going for a very radio-friendly sound. And I remember it kind of coming out around the same time as Raised on Radio by Journey. And with Raised on Radio, it had a very accessible sound. And I think they were kind of going for that same kind of vibe and sound. Even up to and including the song Rock My Radio. Like that almost sounded like it was penned out of, listening to the Journey album, too much or something. But so that, so Night of the Crime was an incredible album, but then with A More Perfect Union, it kind of shot off from the way that they were writing all the ballads on Night of the Crime. They had really good, like really nice stretches, I remember, of the way that they would play everything, especially when John would show me, because that was around the time that I started to, I guess now that I think about it, Jerry was already singing with them when I was taking lessons, I think. I think he was singing with them when I was still taking lessons, something like that. Because I remember John coming in to the lessons with some ideas that he was showing me on the latest things they were doing. And I was just like, this is an incredible way of playing guitar, But he also showed me a lot of that for Night of the Crime too. So it was just it's a very cool and inimitable way of playing. It's hard to, and it really wasn't as present on Right Between the Eyes. Danny didn't use a lot of those chords like he did on the other albums, like a lot of the John chords. A lot of the John chords are really stretches. And as John explained it, a lot of that came about because they were in the studio writing with professional musicians, professional songwriters. And I think he said one of the songwriters was sitting at the piano with them, Bob Halligan Jr., who did write with Kiss and a lot of other artists. He wrote a lot of the songs off Night of the Crime. I think he was sitting at the piano playing piano voicings. Like he would play, like fifths, 13ths, ninths, 11ths, whatever. And he would play those chords, and Dan and John would kind of figure out how to play them. And John was more of the player that was very apt and more likely to pick the really like piano stretch chords on guitar. They were just wild chords. You didn't really see those in rock music that much. Again, it was mostly Born to Be Wild, Born to Be Wild, with everybody in the band playing the same thing. The singer, the drummer, the bass player, the guitar player, everybody's playing the same melody. It's just, that was the vibe at the time. And so to see these weird, wild chords come out of nowhere was pretty amazing.
Yeah, it was one of the things while I was listening to it is like, I don't know much about bass and drums, but you seem to have a very solid rhythm section. The singer, of course, was really good, and like I said, it might have been a touch much at some points, but I thought he did like a very David Coverdale-esque vocals. But Dan Wexler he's got to be one of the most underrated guitarists I've ever listened to, because I've never heard of him. And you always get those lists, most underrated guitarists, and they're like, oh, then they pull out people like Vito Bratta or something like that, and those are names that are pretty well known. But Dan Wexler, unfortunately, didn't seem to get his due. And I was listening to him, oh my gosh, why?
Yeah.
How did he not make it in the guitar world and Guitar for the Practicing Musician, all these guitar magazines?
Right. And even John Aquilino, same thing. Both of them, they have different styles, but they're inimitable, and they really are unique and inimitable. They really are. And it is surprising that, if they would have had some notoriety and would have been in more magazines, if Steve would have hung out a little bit longer, after Night of the Crime was released, I think they would have had some great opening slots for bands, here again, like Scorpions, Aerosmith, of that caliber. And that would have, catapulted them into the next level. And then I think Guitar Player magazine would have said, who are these kind of young up and coming hot shots, dual guitar leads, who are these guys, and they might have made Guitar Player magazine at some point. It's really a shame they did. It's true.
Well, it's a different story. It's like when Dokken broke up, when they could have been broken big. Like, I know they were on the verge of being huge, and then their egos, of course, kind of took over, and they kind of broke up. I was upset by that, but it's just sometimes the timing.
Yeah, Jeff Wilson, great bass player. Don Dokken, great singer.
Yeah.
They were a great band. Yeah, they were, incredible band. Great songs too.
Yeah.
Into the fire. I'm falling. So
speaking of breaking up, so what was the ultimate reason that Icon, this version of Icon, decided to just call it, I don't know, quits, or just kind of go their own ways?
Yeah, it's a great point. So, because it's hard to pinpoint one thing typically. I think our first tour around the States, Pat Dixon was with us, and then he just kind of got sick of it and he left, and so it was a big blow to lose Pat. So now we're down to only two founding members, which is Dan Wexler and Tracy Wallach, the bass player. So At that point, we got Dave Lauser from Sammy Hagar's band to come play with us on drums. You know, pretty big drummer, great guy, funny. I really like Pat. I mean, Pat's like a brother. Like that dude's amazing. I mean, at that time, he was almost like an older brother because he was like, you know, he was so knowledgeable about the road and the band and all that. And I was like, you know, show me what Icon's like, you know. And Pat was always really cool to me because Pat and I had girlfriends on the road. So we were playing cards after gigs, you know, going to get food. You know, we didn't really hang out with the crowd and try to meet people and, you know,
Right.
hobnob and all that or whatever. So we wound up hanging out and just like, you know, I really looked up to Pat. I thought he was a really good musician and really cool, like older brother type. So, you know, fast forward, now we're with Dave Lauser, and he's a good guy too. You know, cool dude. He knew the ropes because he played with Sammy Hagar in bigger bands and bigger venues. So he's a very solid player. He didn't play as heavy as Pat. He certainly had a different style. So now the band sounded a little differently. Jerry was kind of drinking a lot. You know, he's on the road, partying, having fun. I mean, the dude was 25, 26, living the dream, you know, and
Mhm.
um, I was too. I was like 19, 20, whatever, you know, feeling the same. You know, it was so fun to join these guys. And we both loved their music, you know. But I think Jerry was not getting enough sleep, not resting his voice, not taking care of his voice. It's really hard to sing like some of those singers, you know, like if you ever watch, like one day a few years ago, or actually maybe like 8 years or 9 years ago, I remember waking up thinking, how the hell did Bon Jovi sing Living on a Prayer? Like, how does he even do that live? Like, they even modulate up a half step or a whole step, you know, towards the end of the song. And it's still like in the stratosphere. How the hell does he do that? So I looked up the video, and every time live, he's like, oh, we're halfway there. And he hands it out to the audience every time. And they're like, oh, living on a prayer. And I was like, that's how he does it. But, you know, every singer has what works for them live. You know, if you look at somebody like, you know, like, I want to say maybe like Queen, you know, so you look at Freddie Mercury. I mean, he's operatic with his voice and his range is stellar. And on a tour where you're playing 180 to 200 dates out of the year, you have to keep that up. You have to get, I mean, I'm going through it right now. I actually lost my voice recently because I got sick recently and lost my voice. And I've been doing a lot of live dates lately, and I've been doing like 3 and 4 hour gigs where we play a lot of songs, you know, for many, many hours. And it's really fun. I love it. I love singing, I love playing, I love all of it. But you just got to take care of your voice. You really do. And you know, if Jerry would have been drinking like hot tea on the road with honey, getting enough sleep, taking care of his voice, we don't push him so hard to nail the songs. You know, certainly if we would have tuned down a half a step, all the instruments to E flat, it's another great, that's one of the secrets that we do in the band that I'm in now. You know, I'm in like a tribute band. We're called Green 182. So we do Green Day and Blink 182. And we do like a bunch of Nirvana and Foo Fighters and The Killers and Radiohead and, you know, bands that I like. And I do like Green Day and Blink. I'm not the biggest fan of Blink, but I love singing it. It's fun to sing it all. And I just, you have to really get your voice up to those, you know, to that level to be able to do it consistently for hours. And if you don't take care of your voice, you just lose it. So anyways, to get through 4 hours of the gig of what we have, you know, when we have 4 hour gigs, we tune down to E flat. And it just, that little bit, it just helps. I mean, we'll do Sweet Child of Mine and Don't Stop Believing. And those are like the top of my range songs. And they're very hard to sing like Axl and like, you know, and like Steve Perry. I mean, neither Axl nor Steve Perry can sing like that anymore. But so I really have to push myself. And, you know, and again, there are little things you can do like tuning down to help do that. And we should have done that. We should have really thought all those things through. We didn't think those things through. We're on tour. Jerry's losing his voice. And sorry, I know some of my stories kind of wind around a little bit to get to the point.
You get there.
Yeah, I get there eventually. My dad was like, is a storyteller. And like, I was kind of raised in a household where my dad told stories a lot. So, you know, we're on the road. It's not working out. We only have 2 of the original band members. everyone's kind of struggling with supporting Jerry. And if you listen to, if you Google Icon Live or something like that, you know, and you find us online, there's one show at in New York City. I forget, it's at the Roxy or something. I forget where it's at. And you can hear, like, Jerry comes out right off the bat, out of the gate, and his voice sounds like Elmer Fudd. It's just like, it's shot. His voice is shot. And that show was for industry people. Like, that show was Megaforce Records and Eddie Trunk getting all of his friends out and associates to come see us and pulling favors. And it was not the show to bomb, but we bombed that show. It's one of our worst, and it's forever, etched into the internet now as one of the only live recordings I've ever found of us, playing live.
Oh no. Huh.
Pretty bad gig. And so we had a bunch of those, and I think eventually people got, Wexler was getting pissed at Jerry, and I think that tensions were just rising. And at that point, it kind of broke apart the brotherhood, and we were in Europe, and I forget exactly what happened. I always like to romanticize it and think it's like a Spinal Tap episode, like, you've got the square baloney and you didn't leave me 4 squares and didn't cut them off, and your girlfriend slept with my girlfriend and my girlfriend slept with your girlfriend. None of that happened, but I always romanticize it like that. But it was something more innocuous than that and less important. But it was just like not getting along, and Jerry's voice not being there over so many, months, and it just drug us all down. And so broke up the band, and I think that the label was lacking in interest too, or waning in interest, because we hadn't been doing very well on the road. We've been doing these smaller 300 person, gigs, and we weren't selling out. I think if we would have been doing the older music, we might have been able to pull some other crowds, because I think so many fans wanted to hear the first 2 albums.